like summer is over in a flash and you're on your way. Somebody near, it's open for tonight, it's not too late. My mind says yes, you've been here for quite some time, but my heart tells me you should stay a little while. Are we at the end or are we at the start? 129 beats per minute from my heart. Anywhere we go is where I long to roam. Night or day, I'm taking you all the way, 'cause my heart screams, let me carry you home.
We're starting today in Jiyugaoka. It's the kind of place you come for a slow afternoon of coffee, pastries, homeware browsing, and quiet corners. This chic, cafe and lifestyle neighborhood exudes a soft European vibe. Think pretty promenades, dessert stops, and relaxed shopping in calm and leafy streets. What Jiyugaoka is, in one line, the stylish cafe and suites district. An upscale residential pocket that's laid back and known for pretty streets and lifestyle boutiques rather than big tourist attractions. The neighborhood is often called Tokyo's Little Europe, thanks to European-inspired spots like La Vita Plaza with its canal, gondola, and brick bridge. Rue Marie Claire, a boutique-lined lane with a Parisian feel, and Green Street, a leafy promenade perfect for a relaxed stroll. We began at Alpha Beta Coffee with avocado toast and coffee, then wandered the streets before stopping at Nana's green tea for its summer parfaits, matcha, and an onigiri. Next, we joined the crowd at Milkland Hokkaido to taste some Hokkaido ice cream and chocolate drinks. We also made a stop at Today's Special, a lifestyle store filled with curated homeware and charming finds that perfectly fit Jiyugaoka's relaxed, stylish vibe. We paused at Jiyugaoka Kumano-jinja Shrine, a beautiful and peaceful sanctuary. This small, historic shrine dates back to the Kamakura period and is known locally as a power spot for love and good fortune. Then we visited Kosoan, a traditional Japanese tea house in a former Taisho-era home. People come here to enjoy classic Japanese desserts like anmitsu and matcha floats. We were able to catch a summer Bon Odori festival with families and children in yukata, dancing together in a joyful circle. Jiyugaoka turned out to be more than we expected. Let's show you what the day looked like.
up in my mind. Oh, it's not hard to see why I was feeling that. You saw right through it all. Oh, I could not fake it, no matter how I tried. Ooh, you cured my aching heart. When you came around, I saw a million signs. I must be over it by now. There's a reason why. Ooh, I think I might be over my troubles. Yeah, they've been there for so long now. Ooh, 'cause suddenly I think of tomorrow. Yeah, since you came around. Ooh, I feel like the only one who found out the reason why. Oh, I was just lonely, but since you came around, all I see is tomorrow. When you hear me calling, oh, it's you and me. Ooh, yeah, 'cause I cannot fake it, no matter how I feel. Yeah, 'cause you heal my aching heart. When you come around, I saw a million signs. I must be over it by now. There's a reason why. Oh, I think I might be over my troubles. They've been there for so long now. It's over. Suddenly I think of tomorrow. Yeah, since you came around. Yeah, ooh, I feel like the only one who found out the reason why.
yummy. Some mochi. Maybe a matcha level 2. It is the best.
Best what?
Tastes like Roy's chocolate, but nutty. This one is the eel onigiri. Let's try it. It is the eel.
my heart screams, let me carry you home,
But now you're gone, and all I have is time. And though you're not here anymore, I still think about you. 'Cause baby,